So I was first gen to go off to college, but growing up, I grew up on a family farm that had been in my family for, my dad would have been fourth generation. In the 80s, in the middle part of the country, the farming industry was very, very depressed and economy at that time. And there were farmers that were losing their farms. And my family was no different. Even though this farm had been in my family for a long time, my father was having a hard time making it. He knew that he was going to lose the farm if he did not do something different. He started a business in town. He never thought he would start a business, but he started a business in town, and they operated that business for 30 years, maybe. They just sold it 2 years ago so that they could both retire. That business really saved our farm.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Scott Burditt. Scott is a strategic growth advisor to mid-market financial services companies who seek top-level revenue growth. He has nearly 30 years' experience advising companies on transformative marketing and sales and service strategies that consistently achieve double-digit growth. Scott inspires member-centric thinking, and his mission is to help executive leaders create enhanced value for those they serve. His broad industry experience, innovative and entrepreneurial spirit, curiosity for discovering the root of any problem, and collaborative approach for aligning people around a common vision enable him to invent, communicate, and execute transformative strategies that achieve growth. Prior to launching his consulting practice, Scott served in various executive roles for banks, credit unions, financial tech, and investment management firms, where he consistently drove double-digit revenue by implementing transformative change in how organizations acquire, grow, and retain customers. You can learn more about Scott at burdittconsulting.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Scott.
Scott, I'd like to welcome you to the Corporate Couch this afternoon.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, love your office setup. Where do you office at again?
I am at the WeWork location in the Crossroads.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
And very nice headphones there. What brand are those?
I don't even know. They're very old. I need new ones.
Oh, it looks
but
good.
I like them better than my AirPods. I look like a gamer, right?
Yeah, there you go. Or a pilot. We got Whiskey 49er. You're coming in runway 785. Wow, it's a Tuesday afternoon. We have not had happy hour yet. At least I have not. So anyhow, thanks
I'm
again.
I'm ready when you are.
Sounds good. Hey, so we've been in the COVID pandemic for 3 years now, give or take. And I always like to ask people, now that Zoom is, as commonplace as driving to an office in the pre-COVID days, what's the craziest attire you've seen on a professional Zoom call, or lack of attire that somebody had on a Zoom call?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is a ball cap backwards.
Okay.
And I'm just like, really? I mean, come on.
Okay. What was the second one?
A tank top.
No?
A man in a tank top.
Oh, wow. What was he, 17, 18 years old?
No, he was in his 40s.
Yeah, I'd like tank tops in high school and college, and maybe parts of my 20s. But anyhow,
it's a different time. Anything goes a little bit.
Yeah, the tank top after a workout. Yeah, after a
Exactly.
workout too. Yeah, so I also like to talk about people's childhood, forms us as adults, but growing up, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But growing up, what did you want to be when you became an adult? What was your kind of goal, the dream?
Well, there were two things. My earliest years, so I grew up on a farm in Northeast Missouri, and my first thing that I wanted to be was a veterinarian. And I'm not really sure why. The veterinarians that would come out to our farm, they were cool. They seemed like they were pretty smart folks, and so I'm like, I want to be a veterinarian. And then the second thing is once I got a little older, then I wanted to be a politician.
I can see that.
Yeah, I would not run for. I applaud anyone who runs for office. I would not do it in the current landscape.
Yeah, so preparing to talk to you today, I was glancing at your LinkedIn, but talk about your dad and your family growing up. I know it was a fourth generation farm, and it seems like he was a very innovative person. And yeah, talk about that experience.
Yeah, so I was first gen to go off to college. I went to Mizzou when I was, right after I graduated from high school. But growing up, I grew up on a family farm that had been in my family for, my dad would have been fourth generation, I think, and it was at a time where a large part of my childhood was in the '80s. And the '80s in the middle part of the country was a time there was a lot of the agriculture industry, the farming industry was very, very depressed, and it was just not a very solid economy at that time, and there were farmers that were losing their farms and everything else. And my family was no different. Even though this farm had been in my family for a long time, my father was having a hard time making it. And there was a lot of stress that was going on at the house. I'm not sure that I knew that there was as much stress when I was there, but now kind of reflecting upon it as an adult, I realized some of the pressure that my mom and dad were under. And when I was entering high school, I think it was about the time I was entering high school, he knew that he was going to lose the farm if he did not do something different. And so he started a business in town. He never thought he would, start a business, but he started a business in town and with his brother-in-law. And that they operated that business for not 30 years, maybe. They just sold it two years ago so that they could both retire. But that business really saved our farm, and it gave him really all the security that he needed. And so it was pretty cool. But what's cool about that story, and the thing that I've tried to learn from kind of his journey, is to be pretty reflective and know when things aren't working, and then to not be, even though you may not know what that next destination is going to look like, or there are no guarantees it's going to work. You got to have faith, and you got to just keep kind of putting one step in front of the other, and innovate in an effort to continue to remain relevant and create some level of stability in your life. So it was a cool story, and it really did shape me. I did not realize that it shaped me in my 20s or maybe even in my 30s, but once I got to my late 30s, early 40s, I realized that upbringing and some of those experiences that I had with some of my dad's challenges associated with saving the farm, they really did impact kind of the decisions that I make today.
Yeah, Crowley, did you, I know you were entering high school, did you work there at part-time, summers, or after school or anything like that?
Well, I'll answer the question in two ways. So if you grow up on a farm, you work on the farm, and you don't really get paid to work on the farm.
Right.
So I absolutely worked on the farm, starting when I was a young child. When he went to town and started operating the business, I never worked at the shop with him.
Yeah,
I did not.
You're actually the third guest that's grew up on a farm. Tabitha Scott, who I interviewed, I think she was episode 4, grew up in Kentucky, talks about that. Teresa Carey, who actually I interviewed her a while ago, but her podcast launched today. She grew up in a farm in North Carolina. So yeah, it's very, the work ethic, putting the hours in. And I always loved the Stephen Covey, law of the farm. It's a process, and you have to plant, fertilize the land, plant the seed, and it's a process. You can't hurry the process.
You can't hurry the process, and there's a lot of the process that's out of your control.
Yes. So yeah, I think in a prior life I grew up on a farm, but I did not. I did not. So, and you know what I loved about so I worked for Bayer Crop Science here when it was still in Kansas City, and headed up marketing and advertising and customer care and a few other functions. But what I loved about it, and I had no agriculture background, but all the people I worked with, I mean, they hired me just because I had a diverse experience. They had a bunch of people that knew ag. They didn't have, people that, knew customer experience and customer segmentation and information-based marketing strategies and things like that. And it was just phenomenal that that such passion for agriculture, and it was inbred in the families. Like they grew up on farms. They went to various colleges for ag marketing degrees. And it was phenomenal. I mean, work animal health, drug manufacturing, the veterinarian, supplying, supporting veterinarians, and the two industries are very similar, very caring, passionate, but especially agriculture. It was in people's blood, that worked at Bayer. It was phenomenal to see.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of pride. I think that's the word that I would use. The folks that, where that's their upbringing and they choose that as a career, there's a great deal of pride and mission orientation to where, a lot of people don't really think about kind of the mission purpose of someone that's farming when they choose that career choice. They don't really take it. They don't take it lightly, and they know that their job and part is, feeding some portion of the world. And I think having that mission orientation does provide them with a lot of pride. So even though I have not chosen farming as a profession, it's still very much ingrained in my DNA.
Just a quick story from Bayer. The guy who ran our potato fungicide, herbicide, brand. I think it was Dan something Meeks, I think, came into my office once. He goes, it's crazy. You go to a grocery store, a bag of dirt costs more than a bag of potatoes.
That is funny.
He goes, yeah, look, you go get Miracle Grow potting soil and compare it to, some Idaho potatoes. And he was right.
Yeah, that is pretty funny.
Oh, God. So why'd you pick Mizzou?
Well, I had wanted to go there ever since, the minute that I started high school, I knew that I wanted to go to Mizzou, and they had a great agriculture college. I knew some of the faculty there because I was pretty involved in an organization called FFA at the time.
Oh, sure.
And I knew I was going to major in ag. Just really for the purposes of making the transition to college. I grew up in a community of, 2,000 people. And so to, go to Mizzou where there were, 25,000 students at the time, that was going to be a big transition. So to ease that transition, I enrolled in the ag college and majored in agriculture journalism, which basically dually enrolled me in the J school at Mizzou and the College of Ag. And my intention after I went to Mizzou was I was going to go to law school to kind of follow that route to become a lawyer and then politician. And those plans were derailed.
Yeah. So what derailed them?
I had an internship between my junior and senior year of college with a PR firm called Fleischman Hillard, and they had an agriculture division. And it was a great internship. And the senior partner at the time, his name was Gary Kisner. He ran the ag division there. he knew kind of what my intention was, that I wanted to go to law school. And he's like, you know what, but before the end of the summer, we're going to change your mind. And I don't know that my mind was fully changed at the end of the summer, but then I ended up getting a job offer in November of that year. And they wanted me to start in January before I had even finished my degree. And I'm like, you know what? Starting making money versus going in debt, going to law school, I think I'll start making money. So I decided to take the offer and give it a shot.
Wow. So it basically didn't even interview for the job. Probably interviewed for the internship, but
right.
Yeah, wow, that's phenomenal. Did you even end up applying to any law schools prior to November?
I had taken the LSAT. And was starting the application process.
Wow.
And, you know, and I say, now you're testing my memory here for a minute. I say November. It may have been earlier than that, because one of the things I was doing, I was freelancing with them. Once I got back to school, I started doing some freelance work for them for the first couple of months. And then they just said, you know what, we want you full time. So that's kind of how I began my career. But it started as a result of having a really great internship experience with Fleischman.
So that gentleman, was he your first professional mentor at post-college?
Yeah, and I didn't work with him extra closely, but I observed and watched him like I just was a sponge whenever I was in a meeting with him and some of the other partners at Fleischman. And you know, at the time, I don't know that I really realized what a gift it was that I worked there. But you know, by the time I had gotten to my second job, I realized that I don't know that I could have started my career at a better place, because I had, I was 21, 22 years old, working on some really cool client projects. But more importantly, I was able to actually sit in meetings and listen to how the senior folks, interacted with clients. I heard how they would strategize and problem solve, and I was so intrigued by how they thought about things and how they were able to look at things in a really multidimensional way. It was something that I don't know that I was really taught in my formal education. But then when I got there, I'm like, I learned a ton just by the power of observation.
Yeah, that's great. So what you had a great experience there. So you left to go to American Century. What was the driving force for that move?
So now I'm going to date myself, Jeff. Are you ready?
You can't date yourself more than me, Scott. Don't worry.
Yeah. There was this thing called the World Wide Web or Internet that was
www.
Exactly. It was not mainstream at all. Hardly any businesses were really, some of them may have had a .com site or whatnot, but other than that, there was not a high propensity of organizations that were really doing much in that space. This was in '96. And so I interviewed for this job. It was with American Century, 20th Century at the time, but now American Century. And they were starting an electronic commerce group, and there were 4 people. They were adding a 4th person to this 3-person team that would be like call it a business analyst, if you will, to help them build out the first mutual fund website to allow people to transact business online. So being able to invest online and exchange funds. And so that was the position I applied for. I didn't know anything about it. I had my boss at the time at Fleischman Hillard. I don't even know that we had internet access at Fleischman Hillard at that time, but he had it at his house, and he invited us all out to his home to play around. And this was the dial-up days, and I don't know if his AOL was his provider or what, but that was kind of the first time I saw it, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. So when I saw this position posted, months later, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna at least give it a shot. Of course, I didn't know anything. I'm not even sure how qualified I was, but no one was really qualified at that time to do that stuff. And that's how I ended up leaving Fleischman and going to American Century.
Yeah, interesting, because it's a really big jump to support, Pfizer Animal Health at the time, and a couple of ag clients, and then go to financial services. The part about all those days was, every time you gave the website name, you would say www.sprint.com. Like you would always say the www. I think there's some comic that does a bit on that back in the day, but
that's funny.
Yeah.
You're right. We always said it. Yeah. I'm not sure why.
Right. Well, it's so new. I know, it's crazy. So you worked at ACI, American Century, when it was 20th Century, just a phenomenal, I just interviewed Steve McLean, who spent 12 years there as an executive, and just James Stowers, just a tremendous founder. And I think, a lot of the core values of American Century, or his core values, were part of American Century's culture and core values. Mm-hmm. And there was really, when you worked there, probably no better place to work in Kansas City.
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. Yeah. And because I was there between 96 and 2000, and the JP Morgan partnership started about the time I was leaving. But culturally, it was just a super cool place, and they were very loyal to the people and rewarded people that were there. So it was a great place to work. And that was such a blessing to work there in the role that I had, because I got experience. I mean, we ended up being the first mutual fund company to allow people to transact business online. And so going through that process and negotiating with insurance companies to be able to get insured, et cetera. I mean, I just learned so much. And I was in my, maybe late 20s, probably, I think. Yeah. So to get that kind of experience at that time of my career, it was another great, it wasn't some destination that I thought where I was going to end up. But I'm glad that I kind of took the risk to go, the ag industry and try something different, because it really did kind of set the trajectory for the rest of my career.
When I worked at Sprint, we always thought American Century was the country club, because really they were a company that really cared, like you said, for their employees. I remember you guys got $300 a year to buy new sneakers or do guitar lessons, and I was like, damn, that's pretty good.
They were committed to wellness before wellness was even a thing.
Yeah, and it just I know. They had sabbaticals after so many years of service. Yeah, they were very forward thinking and really caring for their team members. So kudos to them. I'm not so sure it's the same today, but that's for another discussion. So what made you leave there and go to DST?
So because of the experience that I got at American Century, building out the electronic capability, I was recruited out of American Century to go to DST, because DST, obviously at the time, they were a big transfer agent for the mutual fund industry. So they were wanting to do some of the same things that we were doing at ACI, but at a larger scale, more across the entire investment management space. So that was the reason why I left. And when I went there, I ended up being a product manager for a business that did all the printing for a lot of brokerage and mutual fund companies. And they wanted to move from not just printing paper, they wanted to move to being able to provide electronic statements, trade confirmations, prospectuses, et cetera. So I joined them, and as a product manager, led a development team to build out that capability as well.
When you were at American Century, did you gain some more people that you would consider mentors or great leaders that you were trying to emulate?
That's a good question. I had, you asked this question about Fleischman Hillard, and you talked about Gary specifically, and I didn't really answer that question, because he and I just didn't work closely together, because he was like 3 layers up. So that's why I kind of answered it the way that I did in terms of being a sponge. But there were some other folks, a guy by the name of Rick, the late Rick Thamart, who was a mentor to me, and I reported to him probably for the last 2 to 3 years that I worked at Fleischman Hillard, and he was awesome. And then when I went to American Century, there was a woman there that hired me. I didn't report to her the whole time I was there, but her name was Mary. Whitwer, and she was a mentor. I don't know that at the time I really characterized her as being a mentor, but the things that I learned from her was just to really have this, kind of open-mindedness and willingness to think that anything is possible. She was probably the most inspiring leader that I had worked with, kind of at that stage of my career in terms of really embracing innovation and embracing this idea of exploration and being curious and being super open-minded. So she was awesome in that regard, and really, again, like I said, paving the way, not just in terms of the things that I learned that I could apply to future jobs, but some of these soft skills that I learned from her that are still paying dividends to this day. And one of the other things that I would say about that time at American Century, and this was all because of Mary, but we were really change. We were change agents inside that organization because we were fundamentally trying to change the way investors were doing business with us. So, when you're in an organization that had been around for decades and they had gotten used to doing things a certain way, and the people that were there, some of them would have been resistant to change. Some of them would have thought we were crazy. But one of the things that Mary, because we were hitting some roadblocks for sure as we were going through that journey, and one of the things that Mary did is that she hired some change management consultancy out of the Bay Area to basically come live with us in our offices for about a year. And they taught us, about collaboration and consensus building and how to facilitate, working with a group of people towards, and how to get various people on board with things that may be resistant to it. And to this day, I still have the binder that we were given for that training. And I still use some of the tools and techniques that were provided, and I wouldn't have had access to those resources, if it weren't for Mary recognizing that we needed to be knowledgeable and trained on how to build consensus and collaborate with our peers.
Yeah, that's great. Well, do you remember the name of the consulting company?
Nope. Oh, if you don't put me on the spot, I'll think of it later. But probably when this recording is done, I'll remember it.
It's all good. I was just curious. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Great leaders understand that, that you have to sometimes go externally to gain expertise and a different way of thinking, especially in terms of what you were doing, in terms of changing how business is being done. So people are resistant, and so yeah, kudos to her in that aspect. So you stayed at DST about a year before you moved on. What was the what was the driving force behind the transition to your going to U.S. Central?
I mean, again, I would love to say that I was proactive in making some of these changes, but I reacted. So there was someone that approached me about a position that was opening up at U.S. Central. It was a head of strategy and innovation, and I'm like, sure, I'll take a look at it, and went through the interview process and ended up getting there. So it was not I hadn't decided that I wanted to make a switch proactively, and I was out looking for opportunity, right. But it was really just being open to calls that were coming in and being willing to,
sure,
hear about it and explore it. So that's how I ended up at U.S. Central.
Like Mary said, keep an open mind. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And that, U.S. Central was a bank?
Yeah, it was a wholesale credit union. So it basically provided access to liquidity and to Wall Street for credit unions across the country.
What part of your career journey did you start having direct reports? So you officially became a manager / leader.
The U.S. Central job.
Okay. Yeah. So what was that like, and kind of where did you? It sounded like you had some great mentors Fleischman Hilliard and Marriott American Century, but kind of what else did you do to kind of say, okay, now I have people reporting to you I'm responsible for, and I need to, help them, grow, and we have to do great things together. What was your process there?
I learned by failing is how I became a better manager. And what I mean by that is that so the group that I led, it was a small team, and we basically had we were partnering and consulting with internal business units, and I had worked there for a couple of years and had done a pretty good job from a performance standpoint. But then year 3, year 4 came, and we were just, I mean, like, all the business units were asking us for their help. Then we had our clients of the credit union were asking for my group to perform, a variety of different strategic planning and strategic initiatives for them. So I went into my annual review that year thinking, oh my God, this is going to be the best thing ever. I'm going to get, 5-star out of 5. Hopefully, it's like this generous payout from a bonus standpoint, because I was feeling pretty confident. And my boss at the time looked at me and he's like, your interpretation of your performance, or your view of your performance versus mine, is really different. And he's like, let me tell you what my view is. He's like, you, Scott Burditt, are doing an incredible job with the work that you're doing, but we are putting you in a position to manage and lead others, to teach others how to do the great work that you're capable of doing. And right now, when our customers and when the internal business units are calling, they're not calling for the department, they're calling to access you, meaning me. And he's like, and that's got to change. And that was when that was kind of the big eye opener for me, that I really needed to develop into a better, not really a better manager, but really a better leader and coach, and look at how I can help others become, more equipped, have greater skills, learn from me, but then also learn from them as well. But that was kind of a big defining career moment for me as I was moving into a management role.
Kudos to your manager that gave you that. Like a lot of managers would have just let it ride, just kind of reward you for your great performance, but that person saw the bigger picture. And
I've used that example many times as I mentor people that are moving into manager positions. I'm like, don't make the same mistake I made.
Right. Well, I love it. I love the learning by failing. That's great. Yeah, we all did.
I'm still learning by failing.
So I mean, you then go to Two West agency, and I think that was your progression there, and then UMB. But tell the listeners about your experience at 2S and UMB, and kind of some of your great accomplishments at those two organizations.
Yeah, so at 2West, I was the COO of that agency. So the account teams reported into me, and I managed many of the client relationships that we had at the time. And what was cool about that experience, and Ethan Whitehill, who's still in town and is now working at Crux. He was the owner of 2West, and I appreciated him giving me the opportunity to join him. I had known Ethan for a long time, so this kind of speaks to the importance of keeping and maintaining a network, because I had known Ethan for 20 years prior to him hiring me to join. But one of the things that I thought was really cool about the time there, and that was the smallest organization I had worked for up to that date. And we did some really interesting work for clients, and we were always, and this is Ethan's DNA. He's always kind of thinking about the next thing. And one of the things that we really embraced with help from clients like Sprint is this, kind of moving from kind of traditional marketing communications platforms like, print signage and print collateral in store, to really transitioning to more digital related assets that could be changed on a more frequent basis, and in theory, in a more cost effective way in terms of less printing and production. But, it was cool to watch us in that transition because, like when I worked in a larger organization, there would have been a department that would have been responsible for kind of overseeing that transition. But we didn't have a department overseeing that transition. We just kind of had to build the plane as we were flying it. And it was cool to see how we did that. And it really helped foster and facilitate a lot of growth for Two West, but also not just, kind of top line revenue growth, but the mix of work that we started doing really became very digital centric. And it felt like, when we were there, that we did it in a pretty seamless way. So that's what was really cool about the Two West time. And then, at UMB, I was basically like the COO for the consumer division of the bank. I was head of customer experience and operations. And, I really, again, that's what was another, I'd never thought about going back into banking. I'd never worked for a bank. I'd worked in the credit union space. I'd never thought about going into the bank. But, why I went there was that at the time that I joined it, which would have been 2011, there was a lot of regulatory changes that were happening, and there was a lot of fee income being removed from the income statement of particularly the consumer part of the bank. And so we need to really kind of rethink the business model and figure out how we were going to replace some of the revenue that was being lost on the fee income side. So it was an opportunity to go in there and really, again, innovate, think about how to approach the business differently, and how we were going to replace that revenue. And it was super, and it was cool. And I was hired to do one thing, but I ended up doing something different. And the bank took a little bit of a risk on me because I ended up leading, branch operations and call center and the ATM network. And so I became this very operational oriented person while I was there. But the whole intention was to try to embed a more customer friendly approach into the operations of the institution. And it was cool. I learned a ton while I was there. And we made a lot of great contributions to UMB while I was there as well.
Yeah, interesting. So you kind of probably use some of your American Century learning in terms of change, because banks are traditionally not the fastest moving, cultures and things like that, and probably more resistant to change than, startup organizations, obviously.
Well, and you've mentioned mentors a few times, but the person I reported to there was an individual by the name of Christine Pearson. And again, I mean, she would be another one that I would lift up as, really creating an environment that was open to change and wanting to hear new ideas. And, if I wasn't bringing new ideas and asking the hard questions, then I was letting her down. So I think, the thing, as people are thinking about, like work environments to be in and people to work for, I think finding people that have at least this is true for me, because if I'm not working in environments that are receptive to new ideas, I'm going to be stifled and I'm not going to feel like I'm really growing personally. And I just really appreciate the managers and executive leaders that I've worked for that have really created environments and cultures that have been receptive to new thinking and new ideas, because that's when I have flourished. And if you'll notice, Jeff, kind of ever since the moment that I left Fleischman Hillard, I've always been in these roles that have been kind of challenging, kind of the normal, whatever was considered normal practices of the past, or looking for ways to continuously innovate, deliver enhanced service to the customer, so on and so forth. And so that's just been a constant that's been in my career literally for 20, 25 years. And it's what my consulting practice is based on and really built on today.
Yeah, no, we're definitely going to touch on your consulting practice, but you had maybe 7 years on the agency side, probably some more on the client side. What do you see as the biggest difference between the two?
Diversity of work, I think I would say, and that then translates into speed. The agency environment, I mean, one of the things I loved about the agency environment is that you were playing in lots of different businesses. And so that exposure was super cool and it was refreshing. And, it wasn't like you were just learning, one particular business or one particular industry. The other thing that was good about that is, and that just results into speed. And, the agency environment was very fast moving because you're closer to serving the customer. The customers need something, really quickly. And so that would be those would be the two primary differences that I would say on the agency side in terms of what I really liked about it. What I loved about the being on the corporate or client side is being able to have a little bit of a longer term view of the business and being able to be more strategic with the moves that you were making that they didn't necessarily need to pay off, in the next month or the next quarter, but you were able to have a little bit more runway to make some changes that could have impact down the road.
What was the strangest, worst client request you ever received?
Well, I remember my days at Fleishman and Hillard. The person that's popping in mind, this isn't necessarily a strange request, but I had a client out of Chicago that was extremely demanding. She was smart as hell, but she was demanding. And I cannot tell you, these are the days for those listeners out there that can only imagine history with email. We didn't have email at the time. And the number of times that I had to drive to the airport in 1994 and 1995 to FedEx materials to this demanding client in Chicago, it was absurd. It was kind of crazy. But it's the way you had to do business at that time. And I still remember the drop-off deadline was 9:40 at KCI for the FedEx. Isn't that pathetic that stuck in my head?
Yeah, I actually, when I worked for a company, Sprint was our largest client, and we had the business for a few years, and I was responsible for the Sprint account. They put the business up for RFP, and it had to be there on Friday, whatever date that was. And and our office, I reported into the New York office, so it was at 32nd and Park. And literally, and I'm working with like 3 different business partners to put this, big RFP together. There was one FedEx place in Manhattan that was open till midnight to guarantee next day because it had to be there at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. And I'm literally there at, with X number of copies, FedExing it at 11:55 p.m.
Those are the
and
days.
We lost the business, which was not, it was probably the right move by Sprint. We had too many partners. We lost to like Epsilon or some big conglomerate, and we were, piecing things together. Yeah. But anyhow. Yeah. So why'd you go out on your own then after that, to start your own consulting company?
UMB was going through some leadership changes, and I found myself in the midst of that change. So I was given the opportunity after I left UMB to really think about what do I want to do next. And I took about 6 months to figure it out. I had done consulting on the side kind of prior, because ever since I had left US Central, there were institutions that had been calling me to engage and like doing strategic planning for them and things. And so I kind of looked for a job for 6 months after I left UMB. And then, while I was doing that networking, I had a lot of people ask me if I would do a project for them. And so within that kind of 6-month period, I had replaced my income at UMB. And I'm like, you know what? Rather than look for a job, maybe I try this entrepreneurial thing. And so I decided in January of 2016 to stop looking for a job and instead try to build a consulting practice.
So you kind of took your dad's lead and reinvented yourself, right?
Yeah, I guess.
And so what was the biggest surprise starting out on your own, after working corporate America for so many years?
I think the thing that I was most surprised by in that first 12 to 18 months is the generosity of people. And, when I was networking, thinking about my next gig, everyone was willing to, if I reached out to people, they were very giving of their time and willing to have a conversation. And then even when I decided to do my own thing, I was really blessed with people that wanted to help me be successful, and they saw a way how my strengths and things that I could do for them, how that they could, benefit them or whatever. And it just, the generosity of people is what I think I really noticed when I made that transition into entrepreneurship. And then the second thing, and this gets talked about all the time, and I think young people particularly kind of roll their eyes. At least I know my daughter does when I talk to her about it. But the power of the network. I mean, it is. If I did not have the network that I had when I started doing my own thing, I probably would have had a lot harder time getting started. But I had a really amazing network of people that I had consciously and unconsciously cultivated over the years, and so that it was that network that really helped me do what I'm doing today, and just I'm really blessed with the generosity of the people that I've encountered as I've been doing my own thing.
Yeah, it's amazing in terms of just having the relationships and what they mean, and I think just Kansas City is a very generous community in terms of helping each other. How do you help clients with your consulting practice today, Scott?
Yeah, so it's really about growing top line revenues. So I'm a strategy guy. That's what I'm good at. And so, basically what I'm helping them figure out is how to, if they're dissatisfied with their revenue growth or lack thereof, taking a look kind of under the covers at how they're selling, how they're marketing, and how they're delivering service to their clients, to figure out ways to make some changes so that they create a different trajectory for their business. That's the main way. So I'll dabble a lot in kind of sales management work, marketing management work, and customer experience work as well. But it's all related to defining a kind of a desired future state associated with growth and creating a roadmap to get there.
Yeah, I know you do great work. I've heard a lot about from your clients, so that's wonderful. And just I love Christine Pearson reference. We started our career around the same time at AT&T, but we did not know each other. And then she was also at Bayer, but I think she was at the animal health side. I was crop science, and they were different. Animal health got all the money. Things like that. But yeah, she's a fantastic person, and she's leading a Trestle, I think. She's the CEO there. So just to kind of end things, I like to help two different groups of people. One is it's April 4th, 2023. So we're going to have some graduates, college graduates coming out here next month. What advice would you have for them, Scott, in terms of their career and getting their first job?
Oh my gosh. And this is like the perfect question for me, because I have a son that's a junior in college who's sweating bullets right now, trying to figure out what his internship's going to be for the summer. And then I have a daughter who's been out of school for about 18 months. So they've heard all kinds of advice from me over the last couple of years, some advice that they probably would prefer not to hear. But I think the first thing that comes to mind is use this opportunity to talk to as many people as you can. I know it can be intimidating to reach out to people, and you might think that it's weird, but people do want to help, and especially if they know you're starting your career and you're trying to figure shit out and you don't know what you want to do. I mean, we've all been there, and we can relate to that. And people are going to be willing to help. So just don't shy away from this opportunity to try to connect and introduce yourself to as many people as you can. And, it wasn't that long ago that kind of the normal practice was just, to go to a coffee or to go to a lunch, and that can require more time. And now we've got the gift of being able to jump on a Zoom call and where you can literally ask for 10 to 15 minutes of someone's time, and then don't let that relationship end with that 15-minute or 20-minute meeting. Like, figure out ways to stay in front of them and to continue to connect with them. That would be the first thing that I would say. The second thing, I know you didn't ask for multiple, but I'm going to give you a second one, and that's just to be open-minded. I don't know that many people have like a extremely, what they were thinking about doing when they were 20, they're doing at age 40. And I think that you're to really embrace the journey and to be really open-minded with things that come up. And even if it sounds weird and that you may not think you might like it, to at least explore it. I mean, you never know what will happen and where just that one conversation might take you. So those network and approach, the job search process with the level of open-mindedness would be the two things that I would suggest. Oh, and the third, this is important, especially in today's landscape, is to try to manage your stress. I'm not going to tell you to not be stressed about it, because there's a reason that we're given the emotion of stress, but I think it's really important to figure out how to manage your stress, listen to your stress, and just have faith that it's all going to work out. But don't let that stress control you. But just navigate through it, and just have a hope and belief that things will work out, even though you don't necessarily know what you might be doing 6 months from now. Just have a belief that it will work out. Will help you kind of mitigate the stress that comes with starting a career and searching for that job. And hell, that applies to people, whether you're just getting out of college or if you've had 5 jobs and you're looking for your next one.
Yeah, great advice. And then the next group I love to help is, so you just became a manager of people. So before you were just responsible for yourself. You've done great. Now you lead a team. And what advice would you have for them in terms of their leadership journey?
Listen and take an interest in the people that you're leading. I just think that a lot of times managers or executives feel like they have to have the answer. They have to have all the answers, and you don't have to have all the answers. All you need to know is who on your team has the answers. And the only way you're going to know who on your team has the answers is if you really get to know them at a personal level and a professional level, and really listen with a genuine level of curiosity. That's going to make you the best leader. And if you can figure out what makes people tick and how you can help them and how they can help the organization where you're working, you'll be the best leader possible.
Scott, thank you so much for your time, your insight. I'm always impressed by you, and I'd love to be a client of your consulting company as I grow.
I'm not sure how insightful I've been, but hopefully the listeners can learn from some of my failures.
Well, thank you again.
You bet. Thank you.
I love the lessons that Scott learned from his dad. I mean, here his dad was a 3rd or 4th generation farmer. And having worked at Bayer Crop Science, it's just the passion people have around agriculture. Scott grew up in a northeast Missouri small town and goes to the University of Missouri to get his agricultural marketing degree. They're just so passionate about agriculture and what it means. And this is now our 3rd guest that grew up on a farm, Tabitha Scott, Teresa Carrion, and now Scott Burditt. And it's just the work ethic these people have. It's something that drives their whole professional career. Joe, what did you take away from the episode with Scott?
Scott's life mirrors my own a lot. He grew up small town in northeast Missouri. I grew up in a small town in northeast Missouri. The difference was that I was a city boy and he was a country boy. So he was all about agriculture, and FFA. We had FFA chapters, but that wasn't part of my culture. As a matter of fact, that was kind of culture we would make fun of.
When you say city, Joe,
What was the population of your city?
5,000.
5,000. That's a city. Okay.
Macon, Missouri. So I grew up in an area a lot like his. The difference was he grew up on a farm and then went to Mizzou. The interesting thing that he talked about, and he actually ended his conversation talking about this, is that he learned by failing. And boy, I've had enough failures in my life that I know exactly what he's talking about. I'm not going to go into all of them. Maybe that's for another time. But he learned by failing. If you look at every failure that you've ever had in your life, either professionally, personally, relationship-wise, whatever it was, if you're not learning from it and learning from it in a way that you can talk about it, then you're just wasting that failure, and that's kind of a shame. I think everybody ought to be able to learn from that.
Yeah, you can't grow without failing. I mean, no human being would ever learn to walk as a baby if they treated
if
failure.
They didn't fall down. That's why diapers are padded in the rear.
Great insight, Joe. Thank you for that. Speaking of insight, what leadership insight would you like to impart today?
Well, today we're going to go back to that great philosopher, Michael Scott, who one time said, "I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.